All right, sorry, I'm back. Let me finish this up very quickly here. The people then, so I feel like I'm going to be killed. So people then put the pressure on the government to meet those political demands. So essentially, 9/11 happens. I feel like, I live in America, I could be next. And so I'm telling the government, you know what, maybe we should get out of the Middle East. That is bad. The reason that we got attacked is because we're there, so let's get out. And so that helps meet the political demands of the terrorist organization. In this, again, thinking, and Pape's going to use the Clausewitzian sort of idea here, the people are the center of gravity. So remember the center of gravity. This is the thing this is the weak point, that if you can hit this right, then the whole thing comes collapsing down. And so what terrorism assumes that, particularly in a democracy, the people are the sort of the weak point, I guess you could say, the point at which you have sort of the most leverage. This is, by the way, this is not a new idea, and not just for terrorism. Like in World War II, and practically most of 20th century war, this was the general idea. The use of air power and strategic bombing. Strategic bombing is where you essentially send planes over civilian centers and you just bomb the crap out of these civilian centers. So the point where the people say, that's enough, we don't want to fight anymore, and they tell their government to stop. We use this on Nazi Germany, we use this on Japan, Germany used this on London, Germany used this on other places. This was World War II, how it was fought. Yes, we know they were fighting in the sort of the fronts and all that kind of stuff, but there was bombings of cities happening all the time with the idea of trying to get the English people to tell Churchill, we're done, get out. Another version of this idea of the people as the center of gravity are economic sanctions, at least the way they used to be, probably before 2000, I guess I would say. And economic sanctions are really this thing where you're going to cut off trade with this whole country over here. The economy is going to go down, and the average person in the street who's suffering from that is going to turn to their government and say, hey, we need to change what we're doing. So again, that's all fitting into the same thing. It's just that a terrorist group, or I should say an insurgent group or anything like that, they probably don't have a lot of air power and they don't have the ability to do the economic sanctions. So this is another way of putting pressure, causing costs to the people so that they will turn around and do something different. In other words, compelling the people to get their government to step out. So his findings are that suicide terrorism is not irrational. Again, if you look at the single bomber, maybe it is, but that's not who we're looking at here. We're looking at the organizations that are planning and implementing these operations. And suicide terrorism and terrorism in general, so it's not just suicide terrorism, but all terrorism, occurs as part of a larger campaign. Again, with the exception of lone wolves, but that's a very different thing. In general, most of the terrorism you hear about out there, it occurs as part of a larger campaign and these organizations. It is designed to coerce democracies to acquiesce to specific goals. So, for example, if we take Al-Qaeda, the terrorism attacks that were engineered by Al-Qaeda were designed to get democracies, like, for example, the United States, to get out of the Middle East. This is very clear from Osama bin Laden's writings. It's very clear from demands and all this kind of stuff that this was exactly what was wanted, that we want you out of the Middle East, especially out of the holy areas like in Saudi Arabia, which are Mecca and Medina and things like that. Get out of our business. And then one more thing is that suicide terrorism has increased, and terrorism in general has increased as well, because terrorists have learned that it works. You put enough pressure on the people in a democracy and they pull out. So the more that it works, the more that you're going to use it. That's the idea here. So if you're trying to do counterterrorism, so we take this let's take Pape's findings. And then we're sitting around the table trying to figure out, then what do we do for counterterrorism? How do we stop terrorism? If this is what's causing terrorism, how do you stop it? So I want you to think about that for a second. Based on those findings there, what would you do to stop terrorism? I'm going to just hit pause and think about that for a second. All right, good. Number one, you're going to reduce the terrorists' confidence that it works. So in other words, this is a really interesting thing. If the terrorists want you to get out of the Middle East, then here's what you do. You don't get out of the Middle East. I mean, does that make sense? If they want you to do X, then the best thing you can do to make sure they don't use terrorism anymore is don't do X, and then they'll say, well, I guess terrorism doesn't work. Let's try something else. That's the whole idea here. And so the U.S. foreign policy that comes out of this is essentially don't give in to terrorist demands. If they want us out of the Middle East, you know what we're going to do? We're going to send more troops to the Middle East. What? Deal with that. And that's kind of the way that this goes. The other thing you're going to want to do is weaken terrorist organizations. Lessen their ability to actually do those attacks in the first place. That's it. So again, this is very much saying that terrorism is a tool to achieve some goal. So if you don't let them get that goal, then they'll say terrorism doesn't work and they won't use it anymore. All right, so that is the policies that we basically followed from 2005 till I think at least the Obama administration, 2008. This was definitely sort of the way that we did things. It's going to get messier after 2008. We'll talk about that when we get back. So take a break.